Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. It was one of those nights when everything felt still, too still. The kind of silence that wraps around you and makes your thoughts louder than they should be. The power had gone out after dinner, and the whole house was swallowed by darkness. I remember sitting on the couch, the soft hum of rain tapping against the window, when he walked in, my stepson. He didn't say a word at first. He just sat beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his presence in the dark. There was something about that silence. It wasn't awkward, but it wasn't peaceful either. It was charged, like the air before a storm. Every creak of the house, every breath between us, felt like it carried meaning. I told myself it was nothing, just the quiet making things seem more intense than they were. But the truth was, there had been tension between us for weeks now. Unspoken words, lingering glances, moments that seemed to last a little too long before either of us looked away. He had always been kind, gentle in ways that surprised me. Ever since his father started working longer hours out of town, it was usually just the two of us in the house. Dinner together, movie nights, small talks about everything and nothing. But lately, it felt different. The conversations became quieter, the glances heavier. And that night, sitting beside him in the dark, I felt something shift, something I didn't want to name. He finally spoke, his voice low, almost unsure. "Are you okay?" It was such a simple question, but it carried weight. Maybe he sensed the unease I was trying to hide, or maybe he felt it too, the strange pull between us that neither of us understood. I nodded, but I didn't look at him. I couldn't. Because deep down, I knew that if I did, the silence might break in a way we couldn't undo. The rain outside grew louder, filling the room with a soft rhythm. He moved slightly, his arm brushing against mine. Just a small touch, accidental maybe, but it sent a ripple through me. The kind of moment that changes everything without a single word spoken. I remember my heart pounding, unsure if it was fear, guilt, or something else entirely. And then, nothing. Just the sound of our breathing, sinking in the dark. It was like the silence itself was speaking for us, saying all the things we couldn't bring ourselves to say out loud. Maybe it was the darkness that made everything feel closer. Maybe it was loneliness or memories of what was missing. Or maybe, sometimes, two people just find themselves in a moment that neither planned for, but both will remember. The next morning, the rain had stopped, but the silence between us hadn't. He was already in the kitchen when I walked in, pouring coffee like nothing unusual had happened. The faint smell of toast filled the air, and the morning light slipped through the curtains, painting everything in a soft gold. For a second, it almost felt normal. But when our eyes met, that same quiet tension from the night before returned, as if the darkness had never left. He smiled, gentle and sure. "Morning," he said, his voice calm but careful, like he didn't want to stir whatever was still hanging between us. I nodded, pretending to be busy with my cup, pretending that the silence didn't still echo in my mind. We sat across from each other, sipping coffee, talking about small things, the news, the weather, the errands that needed to be done. But under those words was something else. Something we both avoided naming. Every pause felt heavier, every glance longer. It wasn't what we said that mattered anymore, it was what we didn't. I tried to convince myself that I was imagining it. That maybe I was just overthinking, that the quiet last night was only that quiet. But it was hard to believe that when he looked at me the way he did, his eyes soft, curious, almost protective. He had grown up so much in the last few years, and maybe that's what unsettled me most. How easy it was to forget the line that separated the past from the present. As the day went on, I caught myself thinking about that moment in the dark. How close we had been. How easily silence could speak louder than any words. I tried to shake it off, focusing on chores, music, anything that could fill the space. But somehow every song, every quiet corner of the house, seemed to pull me back to that same thought. Later that evening, I found him outside, fixing the garden light that the storm had knocked over. The sky was turning orange, the air still damp. He looked up when he saw me and smiled again, that same calm, steady way that made me feel safe and confused. "I think it's working now," he said. I nodded, standing beside him, the soft hum of crickets filling the air. It should have been an ordinary moment, but it wasn't. There was something unspoken in the way he lingered, the way his voice softened when he talked to me. I wanted to say something, to clear the air, to remind both of us where the boundaries were, but the words never came. Instead, I just stood there, pretending to admire the sunset while my heart kept an uneven rhythm I couldn't explain. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint sound of footsteps in the hallway. I didn't know if they were his or if my mind was playing tricks on me. Either way, the silence between our rooms felt alive, like it was waiting for one of us to break it. The next few days passed in a blur of routine, but beneath it all, something subtle kept shifting. We both acted normal, talked about groceries, shared meals, laughed at random things, but there was always a pause, a glance, a moment that seemed to last too long. It wasn't something we spoke about, yet it was there in everything we did, like a shadow that never left. One evening, his father called. I could hear the conversation from the other room, small talk about work, long shifts, the usual. But the sound of his voice on the phone reminded me of the distance that had slowly grown between us as a family. Months apart had made the house feel emptier, and maybe that emptiness was what made the quiet moments with his son feel so heavy. When he hung up, I noticed a certain sadness in his eyes. Maybe he missed his father more than he admitted. Or maybe he was just tired of pretending everything was fine. We ended up watching a movie that night. Something lighthearted, something that didn't ask for too much thinking. But halfway through, the power flickered again, the same way it had the other night, and suddenly the screen went black. The room was dark except for the faint glow from the window. He laughed softly, shaking his head. "Guess the storm's back," he said. I wanted to laugh too, but my heart was already racing. The dark felt familiar now, almost too familiar. He sat quietly beside me, the sound of rain starting to build outside again. I could feel him looking at me, though I didn't meet his gaze. The air felt charged, like the silence was holding a question neither of us dared to ask. I stood up, pretending to check the fuse box, just to break the tension. "It's fine," he said, standing too. "It'll come back soon." His voice was calm, reassuring. But the way he stepped closer made my breath catch. For a second, I thought he might say something that would change everything. But he didn't. He just turned away, picked up a candle from the shelf, and lit it. The soft light flickered between us, warm and quiet, casting long shadows on the wall. It was strange how something as simple as candlelight could make everything feel so different. The silence between us wasn't empty anymore. It was full of thoughts, regrets, and something unspoken. That night, I couldn't sleep again. The sound of rain mixed with my thoughts, and my mind kept replaying that flicker of light on his face, the way his eyes softened, the way his expression said things he never spoke. I wondered if I was the only one feeling this, or if he carried the same confusion, the same pull that scared me. The next morning, he left early for a friend's place. I watched him from the window, his figure fading down the street. For the first time, I felt a strange kind of emptiness when the door closed behind him. Was it guilt? Or something else? I couldn't tell. All I knew was that something had changed, and pretending it hadn't was getting harder. Sometimes, people cross invisible lines without realizing it. Sometimes, silence becomes a language too loud to ignore. When he came back a few days later, something about him felt different. He didn't say much, but the way he moved around the house, quiet, thoughtful, distant, made the air heavier than before. I asked if everything was okay, and he nodded, giving a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was the kind of smile people wear when they're hiding something or trying to figure something out. That night, the house felt colder. Maybe it was just the wind, maybe it was the silence. I found myself walking past his room more than once, stopping for no reason, then walking away again. It wasn't that I wanted to say anything. I just wanted to understand what had changed. But sometimes, the things we want to ask are the very things we're not supposed to. Later, when I went to close the window in the living room, I saw him sitting outside on the porch, staring into the dark. I hesitated for a moment before joining him. The sky was heavy with clouds, and the air smelled like rain again. He didn't look at me, but he knew I was there. "You ever feel like you can't say what you really mean?" he asked quietly. I froze. The question caught me off guard. I wanted to ask what he meant, but I already knew. It was the same thing I'd been feeling, words sitting just behind the heart, waiting for the wrong moment to escape. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah," I said softly. "Sometimes silence feels safer." He turned then, finally meeting my eyes, and for the first time, I saw everything that had been left unsaid. It was like time stopped for that one moment, every unspoken thought, every quiet night, every breath that carried meaning, all pressing between us. The rain started again, light at first, then heavier. He didn't move. Neither did I. The sound of it hitting the porch filled the silence, and yet the quiet between us was louder than ever. Something was building, an invisible line being stretched tighter and tighter, waiting to snap. Every look, every breath, every pause felt like the edge of something we couldn't turn back from. I wanted to say his name, to tell him we couldn't keep doing this, whatever this was, but my voice wouldn't come. Then the thunder rolled across the sky, loud and sudden, and we both flinched, laughing quietly to break the tension. But even that laugh felt different. It wasn't light anymore, it was trembling, nervous, fragile. In that flicker of lightning, I saw it, the truth we had both been avoiding. And in that moment, I realized that whatever happened next would change everything. That stormy night didn't pass quietly. The power went out again, and the house sank into darkness once more, just like that first night that started it all. Only this time, the silence didn't feel hesitant. It felt like it was waiting for something to happen. I tried to distract myself with small tasks, lighting candles, checking windows, pretending not to notice how the wind rattled the doors. But every sound made my heart jump. He was still on the porch, sitting where I had left him. The flickering candlelight through the window caught the side of his face, calm but unreadable. I hesitated before stepping outside. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the air was thick, heavy with that same quiet energy that had followed us for days. "You should come in," I said, my voice barely louder than the rain. He looked up at me, eyes distant but soft. "I just needed to think," he replied. There was a pause. About us, about everything. The word "us" hung in the air longer than it should have. I didn't move, and neither did he. The world around us seemed to fade, the dripping rain, the creaking porch, the cold breeze. It was just silence again, that same silence that had been pulling us closer, no matter how much I tried to resist it. But then, before I could answer, a car pulled up near the gate. Headlights cut through the darkness, and my heart stopped for a moment. It was his father. I hadn't expected him home that night. The sound of the engine, the door slamming, the footsteps, it all came rushing in too fast. He looked at me, startled, his expression torn between panic and confusion. I whispered, "Go inside," but it was too late. His father was already walking toward us, umbrella in hand, eyes narrowing as he saw the two of us standing there in the dim light, too close, too quiet. The tension broke like a wave. "What's going on?" he asked, voice firm but uncertain. I tried to answer, but my throat went dry. He looked between us, and in that moment, I realized how everything must have looked, the late nights, the shared dinners, the silences. The things that weren't said had finally started to speak for themselves. I couldn't sleep," I managed to say. "We were just talking." He didn't respond right away. Just a small nod, the kind that hides more than it reveals. That night, none of us spoke again. The air inside the house felt heavier than the rain outside. I could feel both their presences, one silent in his room, the other pretending everything was fine as he unpacked his bag. But the real twist came the next morning. His father left early for town, leaving a note on the table saying he'd be back late. I thought it would bring relief, but it didn't. Because an hour later, I found something that changed everything, a small photograph tucked under the candle on the porch. It was of the three of us, taken years ago. But on the back, written in his handwriting, were 5 words: "We can't keep pretending anymore." I didn't know what he meant. Was it a confession? A warning? Or something else entirely? That note turned everything I thought I understood upside down. It wasn't just silence anymore, it was truth creeping in through the cracks, and I knew the next time we faced each other, nothing would ever be the same. I stared at that note for a long time, the handwriting still fresh, the words sinking deeper with every second. We can't keep pretending anymore. My hands trembled slightly as I turned it over again and again, searching for meaning. Part of me wanted to believe it was nothing, just a thought written in passing, but deep down, I knew it wasn't random. It was something he wanted me to see. When he came downstairs later that morning, I held the note out silently. His eyes widened for a second, then softened. He didn't ask how I found it. He just looked at me with that same quiet understanding we had shared for weeks. "I didn't mean to scare you," he said. "I just couldn't keep acting like everything was fine." "What are you trying to say?" I asked. My voice came out smaller than I expected. He hesitated, as if choosing every word carefully. "You've been there when he wasn't. You've been the only one here, keeping this house together." I just didn't realize until now how much that meant to me. The air between us felt heavy again, like it had that night on the porch. Everything we'd tried to avoid, every feeling we'd kept hidden, was right there, unspoken but alive. But before either of us could say more, the front door opened. His father had come back early. The room froze. He looked at the two of us, then at the note still clutched in my hand. For a moment, no one spoke. Then he said quietly, "So it's true." His voice wasn't angry, it was hurt, broken, like he had already known but didn't want to believe it. I tried to explain, to tell him it wasn't what it looked like, but the words fell apart halfway through. He turned away, taking a deep breath. "I trusted both of you," he said. "I left this house believing you'd take care of each other, not lose yourselves in something you can't take back." The silence that followed was unbearable. His son stepped forward, his voice shaking. "It's not her fault," he said. "I'm the one who," but before he could finish, his father stopped him. "No," he said softly. "This isn't about blame. It's about what we choose to do now." And just like that, he walked out the door. No shouting, no anger, just quiet footsteps fading down the road. For a long moment, I stood there frozen. The house felt emptier than ever. Then, as I turned back, I noticed something I hadn't before, another note on the table. It wasn't from the son this time. It was from him. It read, "Sometimes silence is love's cruelest disguise. Don't look for me until you're ready to face the truth." That was the last thing he left behind. Days passed, and the silence in the house became something else, no longer heavy, just hollow. I tried to go about life as usual, but everything carried traces of what had happened. The coffee tasted different, the halls seemed longer, and the sound of the wind against the windows reminded me of that night when everything changed. His father hadn't come back since. There were no calls, no messages, only that final note that said not to look for him until I was ready to face the truth. The truth, I realized, wasn't about what had been said or what had been felt. It was about what we had allowed to grow in the quiet. It was about loneliness, timing, and how two people could drift toward each other simply because no one else was there to stop them. Maybe it wasn't love in the way people talk about love, it was something softer, more confusing, built out of comfort and need. His son eventually decided to move out. He said he needed space to clear his head, to understand who he was outside of everything that had happened. I didn't argue. I knew he was right. Sometimes distance is the only thing that can fix what silence breaks. When he left, he turned to me and said quietly, "You taught me what it means to care for someone. I just wish it hadn't hurt so much." And then he was gone. Weeks turned into months. One morning, I found a letter in the mailbox. It was from his father. There was no return address, just a few words written in his familiar handwriting. We all heal in our own time. Don't carry the guilt forever. I understand now, it wasn't betrayal. It was loneliness. That letter brought me the peace I didn't know I needed. Maybe forgiveness doesn't always come in person. Sometimes it arrives quietly, folded inside an envelope, reminding you that even broken things can still be understood. In the end, the silence that once held so much tension became something else, a reminder of everything we learned through it. About love, about choices, about the spaces we fill when life feels empty. Some stories don't end with clear answers, they end with acceptance. And that was enough. If you've ever faced a moment where love and guilt blurred together, you'll understand this story. Tell me in the comments, do you believe forgiveness can truly heal what silence once damaged? And should there be a sequel showing what happens when he returns? Let me know below. Your thoughts might inspire the next chapter. Summary: a woman's quiet life unravels when emotional boundaries blur between her and her stepson during a season of absence and loneliness. What begins as silent understanding turns into emotional chaos when her husband returns unexpectedly, uncovering truths they can no longer hide. Through heartbreak, separation, and time, the story explores the thin line between love, guilt, and forgiveness, and the silence that binds them all.